I learned the hard way that some people don't enter your life to stay. They arrive to wake something up, to shift the weight inside your chest, and then they leave before you can ask for mercy. I didn't believe that when I was younger. At 52, I knew it was true, and I met her anyway. That morning hadn't announced itself as important. It was gray, damp, forgettable. My knees hurt more than usual. My coffee tasted like it had been reheated too many times, and I was sitting in the hospital garden because there was nowhere else to put the silence. St. Vincent's had that kind of garden. Roses trimmed within an inch of their lives. Benches always slightly wet. The smell of disinfectant hiding behind fresh soil. A place designed to make grief behave. She sat down next to me without asking. No hello. No polite smile. She just faced forward, pulled her coat tighter, and said very calmly that she only stayed one day with people. One full day, start to finish. Then she added, almost kindly, that it worked better that way. I laughed because anything else would have meant taking her seriously too fast. I told her that sounded lonely. She said loneliness usually comes from pretending time isn't real. She said when people know the clock is running, they stop lying to themselves. The way she said it made my laugh die halfway out. I asked her name. She said Rowan. Only Rowan. When I told her mine, she repeated it under her breath, like she was making sure it matched something she already knew. That should have unsettled me. Instead, it felt familiar in a way I couldn't place. She didn't look like someone who belonged there. Her eyes were clear. Her face had color. She moved like she wasn't in pain. But she wore a hospital bracelet turned inward, blank side out, and when a nurse passed by, the woman slowed, glanced at us, and gave Rowan a look that wasn't concern. It was approval. I asked if she was waiting for someone. Rowan said no. She said she was waiting for the day to begin. Then she asked me what I would do if I knew I only had 24 hours with someone who wouldn't be there tomorrow. I told her I honestly didn't know. She smiled and said that was usually how the right answers started. We walked the path slowly, our shoulders close enough to notice. She skipped small talk like it was a waste of oxygen. She asked when I last felt proud of myself, when I last forgave someone without being asked, when I last chose differently instead of safely. I answered without preparing, and it scared me how easy it was. By the time the sky started dimming, it felt less like we'd just met and more like we'd been circling the same moment from opposite sides of our lives. That's when she stopped, turned toward me, and said our day was officially underway. She placed a motel key in my hand, the blue paint chipped thin, and an envelope with my name written in careful block letters. She told me the room was paid for, breakfast included, and that I wasn't allowed to open the envelope until the sun came up. I asked what would happen if I did. She said nothing terrible, just that I'd miss what the day was meant to give me. Then she said something I still hear when things get quiet. She said some stories only make sense if you stay with them until the morning. She didn't say it like a warning. She said it like an invitation. She slipped her arm through mine and started toward the parking lot, as if the choice had already been made. And that was the moment I understood this wasn't coincidence, and it wasn't kindness. It was something precise, something that was going to hurt in a way that mattered. If you've ever felt time close its hand around you, if you've ever met someone you knew you couldn't keep, I hope you stay with me and keep listening. This story only works if you follow it all the way through. And if you don't want to miss what came next, make sure you're subscribed and keep walking with me. The strange thing about knowing you only have one day is how quickly your body starts to cooperate. Hunger feels sharper, sounds feel closer. Even the road seems to lean in, like it's listening. Rowan insisted we eat first. She said stories sit better when there's coffee involved. We drove east until the city thinned out and the rain started again, that fine Oregon drizzle that never fully commits. The diner sat off the highway like it had been forgotten on purpose. One waitress. 4 empty booths, a jukebox humming to itself. She slid into the booth across from me and watched my face like she was memorizing it, not staring, just paying attention in a way people rarely do anymore. She asked what I used to be before I became whatever I was now. I told her I used to take pictures for a living. She nodded like that explained more than I'd said. She asked why I stopped. I told her some losses don't come with funerals. She smiled at that, but her eyes didn't. She said loss has a habit of rearranging people instead of breaking them. I asked how she knew. She turned her coffee cup slowly and said she paid attention to patterns. That was the first time I noticed the faint scar near her wrist, pale and careful, like it had been treated gently. I didn't ask. She didn't hide it. Halfway through our meal, the waitress called Rowan by name, just once, just casually. Rowan didn't react, but something in her shoulders settled, like confirmation. I asked if she'd been there before. She said she'd been a lot of places more than once, even when it felt like the first time. Back in the car, the rain got heavier and the conversation lighter. She laughed easily, the kind of laugh that surprises the person making it. She told me about a town she loved because nothing important ever happened there. She told me about a song she only listened to on the last day of things. She told me she hated goodbyes because people always rushed them. At the motel, the neon sign flickered like it was tired. The clerk barely looked up when Rowan gave her name. The key slid across the counter without a question. That should have bothered me. Instead, it felt like the world was quietly cooperating. Inside the room, she kicked off her shoes and sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly still. She asked if I ever wondered who I would have been if one moment had gone differently. I told her I thought about it more than I admitted. She nodded and said, "Some moments don't change you. They reveal you." That's when my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it buzz twice before answering. The voice on the other end was controlled, careful. They asked if I was with Rowan Hale. Hearing her full name out loud felt like stepping on a loose stair. I asked who was calling. They said they were from the hospital and asked me not to hang up. I looked at Rowan. She was watching me closely now, calm but alert, like she'd been waiting for this exact second. I asked the voice what this was about. There was a pause. Then they said they needed to confirm she was safe. Before I could respond, the call dropped. Silence filled the room. Rain against the window, the hum of the old air conditioner. Rowan exhaled slowly and stood up. She said sometimes the hardest part of a day is when other people try to take it back. I asked her what that meant. She walked past me, touched the envelope still tucked in my jacket pocket, and said we should go for a drive. She said there were things I needed to see before I decided what kind of man I wanted to be when the sun came up. Fear doesn't arrive loud. It settles in quietly, like a second passenger you didn't invite but can't make leave. I drove without asking where we were going. The road narrowed, trees closing in on both sides, rain tapping the windshield in uneven rhythms. Rowan watched the passing darkness like she was checking off memories, not scenery. I wanted to ask a dozen questions. I asked none. Men my age learn when questions are really about protecting themselves. My phone buzzed again. This time I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The silence already told me enough. I started filling in the blanks the way people do when they're scared. Hospital, urgent call, safety check. A woman who didn't belong in a garden meant for goodbyes. The conclusion formed on its own, neat and terrible. She was sick. Terminal, maybe. Slipping out for one last day before the world closed in. And somehow, without meaning to, I'd been recruited into the lie. I pulled over at a turnout overlooking the river, headlights cutting through mist. I told her we should go back, that whatever this was, it didn't feel right anymore. I said it carefully, like I was handling glass. Rowan didn't argue. That was worse. She stepped out of the car and leaned against the hood, rain dotting her hair. She asked me what I was afraid of. I said I didn't want to be responsible for something irreversible. I didn't say death. I didn't have to. She nodded slowly, like I'd confirmed something. She said people always think responsibility means control. She said sometimes it just means staying present when things get heavy. I told her that wasn't fair. She said fairness rarely shows up on days that matter. Headlights swept the road behind us. A security vehicle passed without stopping, moving slower than necessary. My chest tightened. I asked her if they were looking for her. She didn't answer right away. When she did, she said people were always looking for her, some to keep her safe, some to keep themselves comfortable. That's when I said it. I asked if she was dying. The word sat between us, soaked and ugly. Rowan didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She just looked at me with something close to pity and said that everyone was, technically. I snapped that she knew what I meant. She stepped closer and said that what I meant was easier than the truth. Easier stories usually are. I told her I didn't sign up for this. She said I had, the moment I stayed. She said she never hid what the day was. She just didn't explain it the way people expect. I asked her why me? Why pull a stranger into something this serious? She said I wasn't a stranger. Not really. That landed harder than the rain. Another car slowed nearby. A voice called out from the dark, asking if everything was okay. Rowan's hand found my arm, light but grounding. She whispered that we needed to leave, that if we stayed, choices would be taken away. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to do the safe thing, the responsible thing, the thing that would let me sleep later. I looked at the road back toward the hospital. Then I looked at her. Rowan met my eyes and said quietly that this was the moment people usually misunderstood. She said this was where most men decided wrong and spent years convincing themselves it was right. She asked me to trust her for one more stretch of road. And standing there with rain soaking through my jacket and time pressing in from every direction, I realized the day wasn't testing her at all. It was testing me. The truth doesn't always arrive like a confession. Sometimes it shows up like a door you've walked past your whole life, suddenly open, asking if you're brave enough to look inside. We drove until the sky began to thin, that blue-gray hour where night loosens its grip but doesn't fully let go. Rowan directed me to a quiet overlook above the city, the kind of place people come to think things through and usually leave with the same answers they brought. She asked me to park, not because we were done moving, but because it was time to stop running stories ahead of the facts. She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn soft at the edges. She didn't hand it to me. She just held it there, like proof she wasn't improvising. She said she hadn't left the hospital. She said no one was chasing her. What they were doing was watching the clock, the same way she was, making sure the day unfolded the way it needed to. I told her that didn't make sense. She said it would, just not yet. She asked if I remembered a photograph I took years ago, one that never ran because it didn't fit the story they wanted. A man sitting alone on a bus bench, hands folded, staring at nothing. I felt my breath catch. I'd taken hundreds of photos like that, but only one haunted me. She said that picture had been on the wall outside her hospital room for a long time. She said it reminded her that people survive quietly, and that survival deserved witnesses too. That's when I understood the mistake I'd made. I thought the day was about saving her. I thought the danger was losing her. I'd been wrong about both. Rowan said she'd asked for one day outside the routine, not to escape it, but to finish something unfinished. She said the doctors agreed because it wasn't reckless. It was intentional, controlled, kind. The hospital wasn't worried about her body. They were invested in the outcome. She told me the one-day rule wasn't a countdown to her ending. It was a boundary she set so people wouldn't dilute the moment with promises they couldn't keep. She said she didn't want someone mourning a future that never belonged to them. She wanted them awake in the present. I asked her why she chose me. She finally unfolded the paper and handed it over. It was a copy of that old photograph. On the back, in her handwriting, was a sentence that stopped time cold. "You looked like a man who had survived everything except himself." She said she wasn't there to be remembered. She was there to remember me back into myself, to interrupt the slow disappearance I'd mistaken for peace. The fear I'd been carrying cracked open and drained away, replaced by something heavier and cleaner. Responsibility, yes, but not for her life, for my own. Rowan leaned her head against the window and said dawn was coming whether we were ready or not. She said some days aren't meant to be repeated. They're meant to recalibrate you. Then she reminded me about the envelope, still sealed, still waiting. She told me I could open it when the sun rose. She also told me that once I did, there would be no pretending this day was an accident. As the horizon began to glow, I realized the red herring I'd been clutching wasn't about death at all. It was about my fear of finally choosing to live. Morning doesn't arrive all at once. It seeps in, quietly, the way truth does when you finally stop fighting it. We returned to the hospital garden just as the first light reached the tops of the trees. The roses were wet again, the benches cold, the world unchanged in the ways that matter and completely altered in the ways that don't. Rowan walked beside me, slower now, not because she was tired, but because there was no reason to rush anymore. She stopped near the same bench where we'd met. I noticed then how intentional everything had been. The timing, the place, even me. She told me this was as far as our day went. She said she didn't believe in dragging endings past their meaning. I nodded, because for once I didn't need more. I took out the envelope. My hands shook, not from fear, but from recognition. Inside was a single page, folded once. No long explanation, no sentimentality, just a few lines written steady and sure. She thanked me for staying. She told me the day had done its job. She asked me not to honor her by remembering her, but by choosing differently when it mattered. She said the best way to say goodbye was to live in a way that proved the meeting wasn't wasted. I looked up and found her watching me with that familiar, knowing calm. She said this was the part people usually expected to hurt more. She said the pain would come later, in quieter moments, and that was okay. That meant the day had been real. A nurse waited near the garden entrance, giving us space without leaving. Rowan noticed and smiled. She squeezed my hand once, just once. No promises, no words, trying to soften what didn't need softening. Then she let go. I stood there as she walked back toward the building, not looking over her shoulder, trusting me to do the same. And for the first time in years, I did. I stayed where I was, breathing, present, letting the day finish the way it was supposed to. I don't know where Rowan is now. I don't need to. What I know is that the way I move through the world is different. I notice people. I pause longer. I choose braver. One day didn't change my life by adding something to it. It changed my life by returning it to me. If this story stayed with you even a little, I'd really like to know. Which moment hit you the hardest? Leave a comment and tell me. These stories don't end when the screen goes dark. They keep going when we share them.